Hello! In her book on contemporary harmony, Ludmila Ulehla proposes a chord tension level scheme. This tutorial presents chord structure examples for all 9 tension levels and a mapping on the 6 Hindemith chord groups. I'll apply tension control in Schillinger chord progressions and in 2 short musical composition examples. Let's introduce the subject of this video tutorial. In order to achieve harmony dissonance control, we'll use a chord tension level scheme and apply this approach in a number of chord progressions and 2 composition examples. A synthesizer-jazzrock texture and an orchestral suspense cue. First, I'll discuss the fundamentals. This tutorial is based on the chord tension level scheme for modern music proposed by Ludmila Ulehla in her textbook. I'll compare this scheme with the Hindemith chord classification and show example structures. This is the great book on contemporary harmony by Ulehla, where in chapter 19 you'll find the aspect of dissonance control and a vertical tension guide for 4 periods of music. I'll use this diagram extensively. On the left we see the Ulehla chord tension scheme with 10 levels. For each level there's a short description of the chord structure types. I use the symbol I for the semitone interval. I'll map 9 Ulehla levels on the Hindemith chord group classification shown on the right. This scheme is discussed in his book The Craft of Musical Composition. And I did a 5-episode series on applying the Hindemith group classification to atonal pitch class sets and in Schillinger chord progressions. That's where you'll need to go for a detailed discussion of the Hindemith scheme and numerous examples. From the Ellen Forte book on atonal music, I used the 6-element interval class vector, shown in diagram at the bottom. Each pitch class set and chord is characterized by its interval vector that shows the number of dissonant and consonant intervals in the structure. Let's have a closer look at the Ulehla chord tension level guide. I'll pass through the levels, each with a chord type description. I'll map levels 1 to 9 on the 6 Hindemith chord groups and present chord structure examples for each tension level. We'll see 1-to-1 and 1-to-many mappings. First, there's a number of general observations. For both authors, the tritone, 6 semitones 6i, is a distinctive interval. Hindemith puts the no tritone chords in the odd-numbered groups. For Ulehla, these have lower tension level. In slightly more traditional view, she considers chords with tritones as more dissonant. Also, the number of tritones in the structure increases the tension level, whereas for Hindemith this is less relevant. Both consider the classification of structures with up to 6 parts, starting with triads, S3P. Ulehla puts highly dissonant 7-part chords in the top level 10. Hindemith calls chord groups with diminished, augmented and chords in fourths undeterminable, with the dissonance level depending on the surrounding chords. Ulehla puts them in specific categories at a medium tension level. In my opinion, Ulehla attaches greater weight to the chord voicing. Depending on the vertical distribution of closed versus open, highly dissonant minor seconds, major sevenths and minor ninths, she calls the former concordant, the latter discordant structures. Hindemith has a procedure for finding the chord root, as I've illustrated in the last episodes of my 5-part series, and does make a distinction between root position and somewhat higher tension inverted chords in subgroups. But in his book this aspect receives less attention. In my video tutorials I've discussed and demonstrated the effect of different voicings of dissonant chord structures. And now we start the walk through the tension level steps. For both authors, major and minor triads and their inversions land in the lowest dissonance category. This is a 1-to-1 mapping and these structures consist of consonants only, with the thirds 3i and 4i and perfect consonants 5i. Examples are shown in staff notation in close and open position voicing and played now. At level 2 we find the minor 7th chords with extensions and inversions. Note that Hindemith puts these in chord group 3, with higher tension level than the simpler chords with tritone in group 2. These structures contain mildly dissonant major second intervals 2i. In the examples we see an occasional 5-part structure. We may encounter incomplete chords with a specific chordal function omitted, and again note close versus open position. Major 7th chords with extensions and inverted position are at tension level 3 and again mapped to Hindemith group 3. Note that I put the usual sharp 11 extension in the description. However, that yields a tritone interval with the root and therefore is not allowed in the Ulehla scheme. The major 7th yields a dissonant minor 2nd interval I with the root. Again, we encounter both 4 and 5-part structures in various inversion position and voicings. At UTL 4, the chord voicing is relevant for tension level classification in the case of structures without tritone interval. Concordant chords need not be consonant thirds, but must contain many consonant fourths and fifths, and mildly dissonant major seconds or major ninth intervals. There may be the occasional dissonant minor 2nd or major 7th, but these intervals must preferably not be open intervals. In the Hindemith scheme we find these in groups 3 and 5, the latter containing quartal chords. Here we first see 3-part examples, including modal chords S2 and S4, the sus4 and incomplete chords. Note the last chord copied from the Ulehla book that strangely displays an open major 7th between F and E. Is this an inconsistency or a border case? In the same category we find tetrachords, shown here. The first chord, F minor major 7, is a typical example of the occasional major 7th covered by the consonant thirds in the middle, between the outer parts. Likewise, the semitone interval C# to D in the second chord is in the inner parts, with consonant intervals to the outer parts. And here we also find chords in fourths and fifths, plus the incomplete dominant 7th chord. That needs resolution into a tonic chord for its function to be determined. Listen to the triads first. Next, the tetrachords. And the chords in open perfect consonants. At UTL 5 we find many chord types that Hindemith labels as undeterminable, such as the diminished triad, that is the simplest chord containing a tritone, and the augmented triad. Ulehla adds to this collection the half-diminished seventh chord and the whole tone structures without tritone. This is a one-to-many mapping. Here are the examples. Note the C minor 6 chord in the middle, which is equivalent to a half-diminished chord structure. There is only one possible whole tone triad at UTL 5. I'll play the diminished and augmented triad first. And then the other example structures. At level 6 we meet the regular dominant 7th chord with diatonic extensions such as the major 9 and 13. Hindemith puts these in group 2 with a single tritone and in the higher tension level group 4. Here we see 4-part examples in various positions and inversions. I've marked the single tritone interval with brackets to the left of the chord structure. At UTL 6 we also find several 5-part chord structures. We see a number of dominant 9 chords. On the right, note the major 9 chord with the sharp 11 extension, which I put here and not at level 3, since it is equivalent to a dominant 9 chord with added 13th. We may also construct 6-part chords at tension level 6. Here are 2 examples. Let's listen to the set of examples, starting with the tetrachords. We continue with the 5-part structures. And conclude with the 2 6-part chords. We are now entering the high tension level domain with the multiple tritone chords, such as the diminished 7th chord and various extended dominant 7th chords with alterations. These map on Hindemith groups 4 and 6, and note that we may find any interval type in the interval class vector, where, however, there still is a majority of major thirds 4i and major seconds 2i. Here are some typical voicings of the 4-part diminished 7th chord and altered extended dominant 7th chords. We find both single and double tritones. Adding more chordal functions, we may create 5 and 6-part structures at UTL 7. These are regularly found in modern jazz music. Here is how the tetrachords at level 7 sound. And the 5 and 6-part structures. At the highest tension levels, Ulehla puts discordant chord structures, with their many highly exposed dissonant intervals. Here we find many minor seconds, major sevenths and minor ninths. Level 8 lacks the tritone interval 6i, and therefore they correspond to the medium to high tension level Hindemith group 3. These are three-part examples, with a sharp dissonance marked by brackets on the right. Most of these have no equivalent traditional chords and thirds label. In the tetrachord examples, some dissonant intervals may be covered by inner parts, but the dissonance clashes must dominate. There are quite some voicings of the minor chord with major 7 and the major 7th with raised 5th, both favorite Bernard Herrmann film music chords. Let's listen to these tension level 8 examples. And here are the dissonant tetrachords. Finally, we reach the pinnacle of dissonance at tension level 9. The highest level for which Ulehla presents examples in her book, and that can be mapped to a Hindemith chord group. These are discordant structures with a tritone and include polychords and cluster voicings. We start with a number of 4 and 5 part examples with single or multiple tritones marked on the left and highly dissonant intervals marked with brackets on the right. Here we see examples of 6-part polychords and the special category of chords and fourths with a tritone. Listen to these extremely high tension level examples. And the polychords plus chords and fourths with tritone. Well, we finished the fundamentals of this chord tension level scheme, the boring part, so to speak. Maybe for you it's time to take a break and watch the second half of this tutorial at a later moment. However, I'll continue with the application of this approach and discuss a number of chord progressions with deliberate tension control. I'll return to the Schillinger system of musical composition and write chord progressions in various systems of harmony. Dissonance control is achieved by using a pre-planned chord tension level curve. Chord progression 1 is in the diatonic harmony system. I'll use a low to medium tension level and write a 4-part setting. Here's the result, an 11-measure progression in D major. Root movement follows a positive diatonic root cycle pattern R3, R5 and R7, with one negative root cycle exception. The example closes with a traditional strong 2-5-1 cadence. And here's the low to medium tension level pattern, with an UTL 6 apex near the end. Voice leading is smooth, involving stepwise motion and correct preparation and resolution of the dissonant chordal functions 7 and 9. Listen to this progression. We'll be slightly more adventurous in progression example 2, in the Schillinger diatonic-symmetric system of harmony, where we create root movement from the diatonic A-flat major scale and select independent chord structures with pitches not contained in the scale. This time I use medium tension level for another 4-part setting. Roots are all from the diatonic scale, but we note non-diatonic chords with extensions and alterations. Here, root movement is based on positive root cycles only. And there is another strong 4-5-1 closing cadence. Tension level lies between 3 and 7 with a double apex in measures 3 and 5. In the diatonic-symmetric system we encounter altered pitches that need not necessarily resolve in the expected direction, as shown here by the arrows. Again, most voice leading is smooth and stepwise, with correct handling of the 7ths and 9ths. Incorrect resolution is marked with red arrows. Let's play the example. Now the symmetric roots are derived from an equal division of the octave into 6 pitches, forming a whole tone scale. The roots descend in major second steps R to I starting on A. The tension level is medium to high, and an additional 5th part is created by doubling the bass part. A progression like this in the symmetric system would be great for a transition section in a longer piece. We see the descending roots following the A whole tone scale. Now the majority of chords contain tritone intervals and fall into the tension level 6 or 7 category. The voice leading is full of irregular dissonant chordal function preparations and resolution. And here is how it sounds. Progression 4 is in the diatonic-symmetric system, with roots from the C Aeolian minor scale. Again I use medium to high tension level chords. This time we create a genuine 5-part setting with occasional chordal function doubling. Here's the 10 measure result. This time there are far more destabilizing negative diatonic root cycles. We end the progression with a lowered 6-5-1 cadence. The tension level curve tops at an UTL 9 apex in measure 3, and depending on how you would classify the specific voicings and vertical dissonance distribution, 2 cases that would fit into either level 7 or 9. So here we encounter a situation with some ambiguity. The voice leading again shows all sorts of preparations and resolutions, with considerable irregularity, an aspect that is allowed in this system and musical idiom. We will later use this progression in a composition example. The final progression returns to the Schillinger symmetric system of harmony. This time the roots descend with pitches from the C diminished 7th chord. Another equal division of the octave, now in minor thirds R3I. The tension level pattern shows a continuous increase, and the writing is in 6 parts. The example contains 5 chords only, opening and closing on root C. Root movement is labeled as chromatic R3I, descending minor thirds. I have no equivalent diatonic chord labels for the highly discordant chord structures at the end, including a polychord G-flat minor over C7. We observe how the tension level rises from UTL 3 to the maximum 9 at the end. The voice leading shows much irregular dissonance handling, a consequence of the contrary opening motion overlay. Also, this progression will return in a composition example. The first short composition returns to chord progression 4, the diatonic-symmetric example with roots in C minor. It is a moderate tempo waltz in a synthesizer-jazzrock idiom with a feature for soprano saxophone. Listen to the audio and read along with the annotated condensed score. Composition example 2 is based on chord progression 5 in the 4-pitch symmetric harmony system. Now the time signature is 4/4 and I present an 28 measures long orchestral suspense cue. Again, there is an annotated condensed score. What I've tried to do in this video tutorial is to introduce the Ulehla chord tension level classification scheme for harmony dissonance control with my own mapping on the Hindemith chord group diagram. You may consider this as a refinement from the 6 groups to the 9 or 10 levels, providing solutions for the Hindemith undeterminable categories and using the concordant, discordant voicing aspect for categorization into specific levels. I've demonstrated this approach in a number of chord progressions, in various Schillinger systems of harmony and in example compositions. This tutorial is a nice and useful addition to the 5-part series on Schillinger, Hindemith and pitch class sets. Well, I hope that this is another useful music composition technique that will enable you to write in a modern harmony idiom. Feel inspired to experiment and adapt this method to your personal style, but above all, have fun and be creative. If you like this video tutorial, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel, or share this video in order to increase visibility. On my website, go to the PayPal button for a most welcome donation in support of my video production efforts. There you'll also find more content, and for now, thanks for watching.